Okay, we're live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Arden Arcade CPAC meeting. Thank you all for joining us. This is Chairperson Colin Suarez. If I can, I would like to please call the meeting to order. With that, let's go through. Can I ask the clerk to please call a roll call of the members?
Okay, members Biller?
Here.
Member Schiff?
Here.
Member Turner? Member Roten?
Here.
And member Suarez?
Here. All right.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I would now ask us and all those joining us to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. And from the look of it, I believe we have a new member joining us, Member Biller. If I could ask you to please introduce yourself to the CPAC.
Great, thank you. Bo Biller. It's my first time on Blue Jeans here. I work as a lobbyist for one of the firms downtown here in Sacramento, and Rich Desmond appointed me, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot and hopefully helping out with the local planning and any advice or any expertise I can help bring to the table here. So thank you for the welcome.
Absolutely, and we're excited to have you. And with that, we'll go around the table, starting with me. My name is Colin Suarez. I am a resident of the Arden Park neighborhood, and I have been on the CPAC for a little over 3 years. Member Roten.
Yes, I'm a resident of Arden Arcade. I've been living in the Del Paso Manor area for quite a long time. I don't actually know how many years I've been on the CPAC. It's been a while, but I'm enjoying it. And welcome, Member Biller.
And last but certainly not least, Member Schiff.
Hi, thank you. Yes, Damien Schiff. I live with my family in Del Norte Woods in the Arden Arcade area, and I've been on the CPAC for about 2.5 years.
Thank you very much. As is customary with the CPAC, I do like to remind those who are participating, we're your neighbors, we're members of your community. We are all volunteers, so please be gentle. We are trying to balance the interests of the community with the interest of those who are looking to benefit the community. And we would ask that folks please be respectful, kind, and generous towards those who are participating tonight in both their comments and words. So with that in mind, I will kick it to the clerk. Are there any announcements that need to be made before the agenda is heard?
Yes, just have one to read here. In compliance with the directives of the county, state, and Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, this meeting is live streamed and closed to in-person public participation. Temporary procedures are subject to change pursuant to guidelines related to social distancing and minimizing person-to-person contact. To make a verbal comment at today's meeting, dial 916-875-2500 and follow the prompts to be placed in queue for a specific agenda item or off-agenda matter. When the chair opens public comment for a specific agenda item or off-agenda matter, callers will be transferred from the queue into the meeting to make a verbal comment. Written comments are always accepted and can be emailed to boardclerk@saccounty.net. And your comment will be routed to the board and filed in the record.
Okay, thank you very much from the clerk of the board. With that said, let's move on to our first planning project before the board, dealing with the kitchen PCN. Do we have the applicant or owner here to present?
Yes, you do. This is Josh Nelson and Tamara Baker.
Okay, please go ahead.
Before that, Chairperson, let's go ahead and read it into the record. And then
Okay.
also, I Manuel Mejia, want to do a presentation.
Oh, yeah. Apologies, Manny. Jump the
That's
gun.
okay.
Mr.
Thank
Mejia,
you.
please go ahead.
So item number 1 is the kitchen PCN, which is located at 2225 Hurley Way in the Arden Arcade community. And this is a request for a letter of public convenience or necessity, PCN.
Okay. Like I said, my name is Manuel Mejia, Senior Planner. I'll be presenting this item today, which is PONP 2021-0097. Next slide, please. For anybody that wants to get more information about this, you can go to planningdocs.saccounty.net, put in that control number, and you can get all the information that's available to the public. Next slide, please. As stated, this is the kitchen, a restaurant there in the Arden Arcade area. It's at 2225 Hurley Way, Suite 102, approximately 170 feet east of Hurley Way and Howe Avenue intersection in the Arden Arcade community. Next slide. This is a request for a public convenience and necessity, PCN, from the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors for a Type 20 beer, wine, and spirits liquor license for a new retail establishment. Type 20, as you know, is an off-sale license where people can actually buy and take off the premises. Some of the key points is, and this is a very unique one, and like I said, you know how many years I've been doing this, many, and this is the first time that I've come with this model. But this is the restaurant is established, and there is a space next door that they would like to turn into a store focusing on the online delivery of high-end wines and spirits that they do serve there at the kitchen. ABC requires a physical presence for a Type 21 license, regardless of the intent business model. They also require that they have some public store hours so that the public can actually walk in, even though they are not really in favor of this, the applicant, but they have to abide. So they're trying to set as few hours as ABC will allow them to do. So right now they're looking at a storefront hours of operation are planned to be Tuesday through Fridays, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. And then they operate by the business owners of the adjacent kitchen. The kitchen, which has a Type 47 license, which is beer, wine, and spirits to be consumed on site, licensed since 2013 to allow the sale of beer, wine, and spirits. Okay, both establishments will operate independently from one another. Next slide, please. You see here is the floor plan. In blue is the kitchen itself. In the red is the where no alcohol beverage will be employees only, and in the yellow is where they're providing the store with other merchandise also available, not just liquor. Next slide. ABC allows, as you all know, that you're allowed so many liquor licenses per census tract. In this particular census tract, ABC is allowing one off-sale license in the census tract. There are currently 5 active on-sale licenses in this census tract, and you can kind of see some of them. But as you know, those are all the gas stations on the corners there that actually serve the 7-Eleven. Has one, and also most likely the Chevron has one on the corner too. So there are several, but they're a different model. Next slide, please. It is also located in a high crime area. As you can see, the areas in red shows the Arden Arcade area. The items in red are the high crime areas, and this sits in a high crime area in the census tract. Next slide. Here's the 1 mile radius. It shows the kitchen there in the middle, and then it shows all the different licenses that have liquor within that 1 mile radius. So there are quite a few, as you can see. There's 13 Type 20s, which is beer and wine only off sale, and there's 11 spirits and beer and wine, the Type 21 licenses. But again, like I said, this is a kind of a different model than all those. Next slide, please. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. Taking it back to the board, Are there any questions for Mr. Mejia? Hearing none, then now would be the time when the proponents would please come and speak and present their case to us. Thank you.
Good evening. This is Josh Nelson. I'm here with Tamara Baker, my sister and business partner. Can everybody hear us okay?
We can. Please go ahead.
Great.
Hello.
We have the kitchen restaurant. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but we've been in business since 1991, been a current location since 1998. We're the first restaurant in the Sacramento region to earn a Michelin star, which we're very proud of. And we are wanting to expand into our space next door. It's space we currently have under lease and have had under lease for probably not since 1998, but probably, I don't know, the last 10 years at least. But the desire is to have a Type 21 license and do an online retail shop that will not just focus on spirits and beer and wine, but it will be cooking utensils and specialty foods. And so the spirits and wine, all of it's just kind of a complimentary package. In speaking to ABC and the county to this point, there seemed to be a bit of confusion on the concept of delivery versus shipping. We are not going to do delivery, and so our goal is not to sell spirits or anything in the neighborhood, right? We're not door dashing product up and down through the corridor. The idea is to do shipping anywhere in the state or nation. So just wanted to clarify that. I don't know if you want to add anything, Tamara, but we're proud to be in the county. We've been there for a long, long time. We think we're one of a crown jewel, and hope that we've been in the county for 30 years now, celebrated that last week, but that our history and reputation and illustrates that we will be good stewards of this license.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, I'd like to again go to the board. Is there any questions for the applicant from any of the board members? Okay, hearing none. Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
We do not.
Okay, well, I'll move it back to the board. So I will just say that while I understand the need to apply for a PCN exemption for this particular license, when I think of folks that I would love to grant a PCN to, the kitchen restaurant is probably, if not at the top of the list, certainly near to it. So at this time, barring any other comments or questions from the board, I'd like to make a motion to approve the item as presented. And I am currently looking for a second.
Second.
And could whoever made the second please identify yourself?
That was, I guess I'm called Member Biller, would like to second.
Thank you, Councilmember Biller. So a motion being made and a second having been made, Clerk, would you please call a roll on the item?
Okay. Member Biller?
Aye.
Member Schiff?
Aye.
Member Roten?
Aye.
And Member Suarez?
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank
Moving
you.
on. Absolutely. And thank you for supporting our community.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Good evening.
Okay, moving on to item 2 relating to SB2. Clerk, if you could please present.
Item 2 is SB2 housing production streamlining and acceleration amendments to the general plan, zoning code, and countywide design guidelines. And this is a workshop.
Good evening. This is Wendy Hartman with the Office of Planning and Environmental Review. And this series of workshops. We're presenting the same workshop to all 14 CPACs. We're about halfway through all of the CPACs. So first, just to give you a little bit of background on the project, in 2019, Sacramento County received grant funding called the SB2 grant from the state of California. The goal of the funding was to encourage the development of plans that help streamline multifamily housing approvals, as well as accelerate all types of housing production in general. So when staff received the funding, we began our effort by reviewing our existing zoning code, general plan, and design guideline language related to various housing types. And staff also received feedback provided by community stakeholder groups such as the Building Industry Association and Housing Sacramento during our housing element update process, as well as a workshop that was held with the local chapter of the American Institute of Architects to help further understand what areas builders and developers felt needed to be amended to allow better streamlining for different types of housing products. After this initial outreach was completed, we identified several areas needing amendments. So, oops, I'm sorry, can you put the next slide? I keep forgetting I need to do that. So with that, we are proposing amendments to the zoning code, chapters 3, 5, 6, and 7. So most of the chapters, but not all of them, to address development standards, allowed uses, and the processing of permits related to housing developments. Minor amendments to our general plan in order to be consistent with the proposed zoning code changes, as well as amendments to our multifamily design guidelines for compliance with new state regulations. While specific language for each of the amendment areas is still being worked out, at the end of my presentation, I'm hoping to have a discussion with you about the targeted amendment areas and any recommendations for specific changes or concerns you may have about the areas we're proposing to amend. We do plan on having the full amendment package available for a workshop to the Planning Commission late July, and each of the CPACs will receive notification of that workshop, so you're able to participate in the workshop or review the formalized red line strikeouts of the proposed changes. So next slide. So the first targeted area for amendments in our zoning code is to expand product types. So within our RD3 and RD10 zone districts, allowing duplexes and small multifamily projects, and by that we mean projects that are 10 lots or 10 units or less in size. We would still have a discretionary process for larger projects, which would be over 10 units. I do want to make a point that the intent of these changes would not change the density of our zoning districts. It just changes the type of development that can occur on certain parcels. So an example would be if you have an RD4 zoned property, and it's about 20,000 square feet or a half acre in size. Based on 4 units per acre, you could have 2 units on that property. The proposed change would allow for someone to do the traditional parcel map where there would be 1 house on each parcel, or with the proposed amendment, someone could develop a duplex, which would be 2 units on a single parcel. So the overall goal of this is to provide more flexibility in design, potential for redevelopment of underutilized properties, and better ability for small infill developments to recoup development costs. And so on the screen before you is a picture. The middle house is actually a duplex that is nestled between 2 traditional single-family homes. So we're really looking for small project types that will blend in with the. Next slide. So in our outreach to various developers, one of the things that we have heard is that a lot of our existing development standards related to multifamily projects are barriers to allowing these multifamily projects to be developed. So for has an RD20 property, they should be able to develop a 20-unit apartment complex on that 1 acre property. But due to our various setbacks and height restrictions and other requirements for open space and parking, they often struggle to even meet the minimum density that they're required to have under our general plan. And so that's why we have so many apartment type projects that need to come forward with special development permits in order to be developed at all. So we're looking at ways to reduce or remove some of those barriers, such as reducing front yard setbacks from 25 feet to 20 feet, looking at some of our setback standards that we have where a multifamily project is adjacent to single family residential. Right now, those setbacks can range from 25 feet to about 100 feet. And so looking at reducing those based on the scale of the project. Also looking at potential reductions in the amount of open space and amenity requirements that we have, as well as potential reductions in parking requirements. The overall goal is to increase developable areas for multifamily sites, which will also help us meet our housing element requirements for providing the mixture of housing that we're required to have. We are also, though, still paying attention to existing neighborhoods. And so while we may reduce setbacks in some instances, for certain properties that we're going to classify as infill properties that are less than 2 acres in size and surrounded on at least 2 sides by low density residential development, we may still have greater setbacks or requirements on those types of projects to make sure that they remain consistent with the low density surrounding neighborhood. Next slide. So the next area that we are looking at is how developers request deviations from our multifamily residential development standards. Currently, deviations to our multifamily standards require a special development permit to the Planning Commission, and often this becomes very timely and expensive for developers in doing their multifamily projects. So we're looking at a new development type called a minor special development permit, called an SPM, which would be similar to our minor use permit process that we have, which through that process, we still would do a public comment period and analysis by staff before the planning director or her designee would sign off on a project. Similar to the minor use permit process, though, these projects would not go through CPAC review, but they would be appealable to the Board of Zoning Appeals and would also be subject to CEQA review. We're still looking at the level of deviations that we think is appropriate to allow at this very minor level. One of the areas that we're looking at is accessory dwelling units. Right now, accessory dwelling units that want to increase their size or their height, so there's still a max of 1,200 square feet, but if someone wanted to go from what we currently allow by right of 1,000 feet to that 1,200 square feet, or if they wanted to build an ADU above a garage, it requires approval by the zoning administrator, which is also sometimes cost prohibitive for some of these small ADU projects. And so this would be a type of amendment that could be allowed under this new minor special development permit. And then we're also looking at potential for certain deviations from our multifamily projects also qualify under this lower level permit, with kind of a scaled approach where greater deviations or deviations over a certain number or type would need to still go to either the zoning administrator or the planning commission. So this next target area is related to the state density bonus program. I don't think the slide advanced yet. Oh, thank you. So every few years, the state seems to amend the state density bonus program, and most recently, AB 1763 and AB 991 were signed into legislation. And they propose additional changes to the state program, which is included in Chapter 6.5 of the County Zoning Code. Historically, the density bonus program was pretty much restricted to income restricted projects or senior citizen age restricted projects. With the new legislation, new project types will be available under the density bonus program for projects geared towards foster youth, disabled veterans, homeless persons, and college students. The state law also is changing the maximum density bonus that a developer can apply for from a maximum of 35% to 80%. In order to qualify for the density bonus, it is on a sliding scale. So to get to the 80%, a project would have to be 100% affordable. So lower level affordable projects or projects that are providing a lower number of units towards foster youth, disabled vets, or one of the other target groups would have a lower level of density bonus that they could qualify for. The state has also added additional concessions and waivers to our local development standards that a developer can apply for as part of their density bonus project, including additional decreased parking requirements. There will also be an increase for those projects that are rental projects from having to enter into an affordability agreement of 30 years to an affordability agreement of 55 years. And there'll be some additional minor modifications to our Chapter 6 based on additional definitions or modifications to definitions to be consistent with the newest state legislation. I do want to point out that the density bonus program is only for those projects who are willing to go into a regulatory agreement and are going to set aside a certain percentage of I'm sorry, my computer is trying to restart. I'm trying to stop it. A certain percentage of units towards one of the target populations. The next area we're looking at making changes to has to do with the countywide design guidelines. So slide 7, please. So currently, most of the county's design guidelines are considered subjective in nature, and that's why they're guidelines and not standards. But based on recent changes to state law for our multifamily chapter, we are being required to move from these subjective standards to objective standards. So an example would be if we have areas within our design guidelines that discuss fences or walls, and we state that the fence or wall needs to be compatible with the surrounding area, that's subjective, and we can no longer use those types of guidelines or standards. What we have to do then instead is look at language such as only wrought iron fencing will be permitted along a street frontage, or only fencing up to 4 feet in height is allowed along a street frontage in order to make that standard objective. So most of the design guidelines that we currently have in place will still exist. We're just looking for ways to modify them from being subjective to having more objective requirements. There are a couple areas, however, where some new standards will be introduced. And one in particular is where adjacent developments have an existing irrevocable offer of dedication, or IOD. And that's where a project has an existing street stub in place. Sometimes we've ended up with developments that have not continued that street stub, and it therefore is not providing consistency with the county's overall master circulation plans and street networking. And so a new design standard is being proposed that when there's an IOD or street stub in place, the multifamily development will need to tie that into their project in order to complete the circulation network. So you'll have no more dead-end stubs. Another area that would be a little bit different, but is consistent with other guidelines and criteria we have, is pushing parking lot locations to the side and rear of projects in order to lessen visual impacts, and looking to eliminate or reduce perimeter walls when they're adjacent to right-of-ways in order to enhance the street interaction. So the picture on the screen in front of us has it's on a major roadway. The houses are facing the street frontage. There's a low wall with entryways broken up along that. That would be something we'd be looking to encourage versus just having the backs of these multifamily projects right up against the street with a solid wall and no access for pedestrians and whatnot to get out to the main circulation system. Overall, we're looking to have our design standards balance, good design with creating objective qualifications. All right, I'm almost done here, and then we can go into some discussion. So next slide, please. So this final slide is kind of a grab bag of various amendments, various state laws that have changed. One of them is emergency shelters, where SB2 and AB 101 require that we allow for low barrier navigation centers in areas where we allow emergency shelters. And low barrier navigation centers are essentially an emergency shelter that allows for persons that have pets or maybe struggling with alcohol or drug addiction or mental health issues or other situations where they may not typically be allowed in a more traditional emergency shelter. Currently, emergency shelters in the county are limited to our general commercial and our light industrial zone district. So that would be the same zone districts that these low barrier navigation centers would be allowed at this time. And we're also going to need to make some modifications to our emergency shelter provisions in our zoning code because the state has reduced the separation requirements and some of the other development standards that we can require for these types of facilities. The next area is permanent supportive housing. We don't have a definition of that in our zoning code, but we do talk about supportive housing under our group housing or residential care facilities, which is only one type of supportive housing. It is possible for supportive housing to be developed in other single family types of developments. Most often it is developed, however, as a multifamily type of project. And so the state is requiring that we allow for supportive housing in the same manner that we would allow any other multifamily type of development. Supportive housing is typically housing primarily focused on folks who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness. It is a little bit transitional in nature. However, there is no time frame or maximum time frame for how long a person can usually stay in that type of housing, which is different than a lot of your other types of emergency shelter type housing, which may only be available for a single night or a 30 or 60 day time period. Other modifications won't really impact our zoning code or design guidelines. It'll be more about internal processes and procedures or application forms or the guidebook for our zoning code. And they're primarily related to SB 35 and SB 330, which streamline housing development projects by limiting the number of hearings we're allowed to have on housing development projects, establishing stricter processing times and level of review for certain types of housing development. So that concludes the different changes that we're proposing to make based on a lot of changes that have occurred recently in state law. The last slide that I have goes over the next steps in our process. So as I previously mentioned, we're holding workshops with each of the 14 CPACs concluding mid-June, so we're about halfway through the process. Staff plans on finalizing the draft amendments to the zoning code, general plan, and countywide design guidelines for a workshop with the Planning Commission targeted for late July. After that workshop, we'll gather any additional comments and edits that need to be made to the documents, and then we'll schedule formal public hearings before the Planning Commission with final action by the Board of Supervisors. We're hoping for December of this year. On our webpage, under the What's New link, we do have a new link there for the SB2 Housing Production Project, where we'll be posting new information as it becomes available. So once the hearing date for the Planning Commission workshop is scheduled, and we have red line strikeout documents available and ready for public review, they'll be linked to our What's New tab on our website. And then if you have any additional comments after this workshop, please feel free to send them to Jessica Brandt. Jessica is the lead project manager on this project, but several of the staff that are working on it are each taking part in the CPAC. So that concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to discuss any of the slides I presented in more detail and hear your comments or concerns on any of the proposed amendment areas.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation. So I just want to clarify that if there are comments from the CPAC members that wish to be more detailed or specific, they can be emailed to Jessica and considered part of the CPAC record, or must they be given tonight?
Well, the comments that you give tonight obviously will be in my meeting summary notes and in the official minutes, but the comments that you present to Jessica through an email would then be considered prior to us going to our workshop with the Planning Commission. So they'll still be, yeah, it'll give you an opportunity to provide us some more detailed comments if you desire. And I suppose you could issue those comments as an individual member of the CPAC or as just a resident of the county.
All right. Well, thank you. So I will kick it to CPAC members. Does anyone have any question for the clerk's office or any comments about the plan as presented? Okay, I didn't hear any. I would say, well, you know, I will say this is a lot of information, some of it very nuanced and very detailed. There is.
It is, but some of my Delta really rural areas had a lot of, probably very likely not going to be any development out there.
Well, you know, I will say part of my experience has been post the ADU laws. Some localities, not necessarily Sacramento, have done things to try and put their thumbs on the scales back towards guidelines and oversight. I can appreciate that the county is taking steps to attempt to incorporate multifamily housing, particularly the county, which has fairly built out, very few available open plots. I see the value of expanding new development. I would just also say, at least on my end, I always have a great deal of concerns whenever the county tries to establish a more strict standard that would restrict the ability for developments to happen, rather than taking the spirit of the law, which is broadly in favor of improving housing stock. So that would be my only comment. I'm certainly going to work on some more detailed written comments, since I haven't had a whole lot of time to dig into this, particularly about the RD3 to RD10 changes, which I think would affect the county territory, particularly Arden Arcade CPAC area, much more predominantly than some of the others. But I would encourage the board to take a priority on housing stock as the guiding principle when building these amendments to the county plan.
If I may, if it wasn't clear, so adding in the duplexes and the small multifamily projects in the RD 3 through 10 is not a direct state mandate. The density bonuses and the objective standards in our design guidelines and some of the stuff in the later slides are directly related to state mandates. But the stuff on duplexes and housing flexibility and reducing development standards is more within the county's own purview in order to try to encourage housing and reduce some of the barriers.
And greatly appreciate it. Okay, if I Hearing no other questions or comments from the board, I'll thank the clerk for your presentation.
Colin, I do have one.
Go ahead, Member
Member
Roden.
Roden. Yes. I remember in a previous workshop there was talk of I guess it's like streamlining or fast greenlighting ADU project, and there was some talk too of there being maybe even plans or whatever else that were essentially the county was giving out, where you could just, if you wanted an ADU, you could take this plan and it would just be kind of just streamlines through the whole process. Is that kind of thing still in the works, or has that just gone by the wayside because of things like changing the requirements for setbacks and whatever else, and the plan change so that it wouldn't be a special development permit, but it would be a, well, I've forgotten the terminology, but that other different type of whatever. But is that kind of how that's working out in the future?
Actually, that is a really good question. So with this current SB2 grant, we were only able to address certain components. Money only goes so far. But we have a second grant that we received for that one. And it will basically piggyback on some of the stuff that we're doing now under SB2. And one of the components of that are the plans that you're talking about. So as part of that LEAP program, we'll be hiring an architect to develop at least 3 different sized ADUs for us that will go through the complete building permit approval process and then be made available to the public as kind of off-the-shelf plans. So it'll greatly speed up the process for those folks that want to use those plans, as well as significantly reduce the costs, because they're not having to pay for their own, engineer, architect, that sort of thing. So that is in the works. We're also working with some of our other counties who are doing similar things, with the hopes that if we are able to share some of our plans, that then there'll be even a wider variety available to the public. You mentioned, I think you were trying to mention the minor special development permit. So the purpose of that is also to significantly reduce the cost and the time frame for folks needing a minor deviation to one of our development standards. First focusing on ADUs and maybe some of the multifamily standards before moving to looking at other types of developments that could be considered under that minor special development.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Because I think it was actually a comment that Colin had made back when this other workshop occurred, which was that it's funny how the state and the county are looking for more developers and more building of ADUs and other structures to house people. However, they're so difficult and cost prohibitive to even get off the ground that it doesn't really matter. So having that kind of thing working forward is great, because I think if you can make them more affordable to get, then there's more likely to people to do it. So thank you for answering the question.
No problem.
And that's why we keep you around, Tom. So if there's no other comment, and this is not needing a vote since this is an informational item, I will close this agenda item. Moving on to the next topic, we have item 3, staff update. If the clerk of the board has any staff updates to present, please do so now.
We didn't have any comments on that workshop, by the way. I don't have any updates.
Yeah, usually this is Manuel. Usually the staff updates is from the planning department, and we don't have any information for this month.
Okay, great. Well, then I will kick it to the council. Does any individual council member have comments not pertaining to the agenda items we've heard today? Hearing none. Do we have any outstanding public comments for the record?
No, we don't.
All right. No fuss, no muss, the way I like it. So, with that being said, we've exhausted our agenda. The chair would smile upon a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
I would second. So motion being made and second being made. Thank you all. We stand adjourned.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.